let's start by getting our four brilliant panelists here introduced. And why don't we start at the top of my screen? Dave, I think you're first there.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm one of the brilliant ones, but my name is Dave Mitchell. I teach in the biology department. And along with that, I've been a pre-health advisor along with Manny Campos, the overall director of advising for the health professions for over 20 years. And at some point, Allery and Gabby were in my classes and they've lived to tell the stories.
There you go. And Allery, I think you're next.
Yeah, I guess I don't know what to say. I'm a
You're sitting in a car.
Yeah, sorry. I'll be a senior next year, and I'm a biology major. And I'm pre-medicine, but only kind of recently just switched over because I was pre-optometry when I came into college. So it's been a ride, but I think I changed sophomore year. So.
All right, we can talk a little bit about changing your mind then. That's good. And Gabby Lott, one of my star recruits.
I'm from Duluth, same as Tom. And so I just graduated from St. Ben's. I got a degree in biochemistry. And I was also on the pre-med track. And now I'm in a gap year. I'm working as a medical scribe while I apply to medical school. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to get more information from you people as we go because I will definitely ask questions. Dave, why don't we just, perhaps start, we're going to have the students talking a lot, but, and maybe we can have the students do this also. I know one of the questions prospective students ask that are interested in the health sciences is how do they, especially that first year, what does it look like for a student who comes to college and might list on there some sort of health science? How do they go about deciding what that first semester and first year look like?
Well, I'm not sure I know every detail, but I know that students fill out a form about what they're interested in and what classes they've taken. Allery, Gabby can probably tell you all the details. And that gets sent to our academic advising office. A wonderful group of people there. Jason Kelly, the head of it. A wonderful woman who helps us again with the pre-health sciences as well. But I think the biggest thing that any prospective student can do as they're thinking about their path into college and through that first year is to really sit down with mom and dad, a teacher, counselor, somebody, and just say, how can I be successful? And successful means more than just doing well in your classes, but making that transition in life to not just being able to ask somebody to do something for you. And so I think the biggest thing is just simply have some sort of plan, because if that plan changes or if things aren't going well, or if we need to adapt in some way, then, it's easier to do that from a groundwork plan. I think the other thing is that I always say to students, when you think about the things that are happening outside the classroom, those things that you enjoy doing, you should keep doing. If it's playing a musical instrument, being in an athletic team, join some clubs or two, because those things are going to make your life in total probably a little bit better. You'll meet some people, and then that'll give you chances to ask questions of people. And then the last idea that relates to that is, I think in some way, you want to make sure that every year or so, one or two people are getting to know who you are. And doesn't have to just be a faculty member. We're quite fortunate to have retired monks and sisters all over the place doing all kinds of things. And so getting those people to know who you are and having those types of conversations where you can say, this is why I want to be in healthcare and these are my experiences, are quite useful then when you get to the point like Allery and Gabby are when you're applying to medical school and the question becomes, why the heck do you want to do this? And so if you have those people that know who you are, know about your experiences, that can be quite helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know for a fact that Gabby filled her 4 years despite COVID with some pretty amazing things. Gabby, and Allery, you can chip in also. Why don't you talk a little bit about your first year and then maybe even kind of the subsequent 4 years, how you built up your resume and in your experiences that prepared you for medical school application.
Yeah, so I would very much second what Dr. Mitchell said. When I was first coming in, I think like what I wanted to accomplish freshman year was just do well in my coursework, but then also be involved in the things that interested me. And because I think just about every like pre-health profession, like on the application, there is a spot where you have to enter the activities and things that you're involved in college, and they care about those things. And so for me, I grew up figure skating. And so right away I joined the figure skating team at St. Ben's, and I was involved with that all 4 years I was there. I tried out rugby my freshman year just because my mom had played and I thought that sounded pretty fun. I played viola in the orchestra, and that's something that I did all 4 years as well. And then also my freshman year, I got to know one of my chemistry professors pretty well, and at one point expressed interest in the research that he was doing, because a lot of the faculty at St. Ben's and St. John's do research, and both the biology and the chemistry department they do summer research programs. And so the summer after my freshman year, I was able to live on campus and do some chemistry research. And that kind of propelled me into doing like research in my subsequent summers. And at one point, I was considering maybe a career in biomedical research or a MD PhD. And so I think it's really good for schools to see that you've like considered those other things. And then obviously research is just a really great thing to have as well, no matter what field you're going into. But yeah, those are the main things I did like freshman year. I think that there were some other clubs and activities I got into later. For example, if you are interested in like medicine, there's this thing called the Student Health Assistant Program, where basically we go into the St. Cloud ER and we help out. You do about 12 hours a month is the time commitment for that. And you basically just like transfer patients to CT and you help flip rooms between patients. But then on the downtime, you're able to shadow physicians, which is really great, especially if you're like still on the fence about medicine. You can shadow physicians and see like, is this career really for me? And so I would say those are the like main things that I did in college.
Mm-hmm. Allery, you're up.
Oh gosh. Well, so my freshman year got cut short because of COVID. So,
Yeah.
You're starting this new chapter of your life. At that point, I didn't know so much where I was at. I knew I was entering pre-optometry, but I think at the time I didn't really know what I was doing. So then sophomore year, we came back and everything was online. Biology club held one event and I knew I was super interested in biology. So I tried that. And then this past year, so the year after that, I became the club's treasurer, and next year I'll be president. So biology club is something that I've really loved doing and really hope to make better, I guess, now that it wasn't good before. Just trying to get more events out there for everybody. And then when I started realizing that maybe optometry wasn't what I wanted to do, I started volunteering at the St. Cloud Hospital, not through the same thing. They have a couple different volunteer opportunities. So something else in there, and that was transporting patients. And I knew that was sort of my start to wanting to do something in medicine, whether it be a PA or a nurse. From there, when I shadowed. Oh, let's see. Gabby, you have such a nice detailed resume. I really wasn't thinking about this while you were answering.
No,
Not being able to answer.
Yeah. I know that one of the things, especially, Dave, I know both Dave and Manny really talk about the idea of having this whole college experience, and as part of it, also looking at study abroad. Can any of you talk about the study abroad experience and how that fits in with the pre-health programs?
Yeah. For me, I think my outlook on my 4 years in college really changed from a freshman to a sophomore. When I came into college, I met with Manny Campos, who, kind of like we said at the beginning, is another one of the pre-health advisors. And I told Manny that I wasn't planning on studying abroad because I wanted to go straight into med school without a gap year, and I just didn't think I could fit it. And I remember Manny just kind of looked at me and he said, "What's the rush? I love study abroad and I like highly recommend it to everyone. And I think it would be great for you." And so I think kind of as my freshman year came to a close, I started thinking about that more. And then once COVID hit, that was the turning point where I was like, you know what? I think maybe I do want to do a gap year. And nowadays, a lot of people do them. I would recommend a gap year. And so I started looking at the different study abroad opportunities, and I was actually able to do 2 different ones throughout my 4 years. My sophomore year, I guess, I did like a short-term study abroad. It was a chemistry course called fermentation, where we took, it was like a 2-credit course that you took in the fall semester, our winter break. So I think we left like December 28th and got back mid-January. We went to Belgium and the Netherlands. And so that was part of the course. And that was my first time being outside of the United States, and I loved it. And so then that led me to my senior year. I studied abroad in London. And that was also a great experience. I lived abroad for a whole semester. I was taking coursework over there. And then I completed an internship as well. I was a policy intern at a nonprofit called Muscular Dystrophy UK. And so that kind of gave me some experience in the health policy side of things, which was new. And so, yeah, I really loved study abroad and would recommend it to anyone interested.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any good insights there?
So
yeah, we're calling you,
study
Dave.
abroad is, sorry, study abroad is great. And, you know, if you can do things like Gabby did that have some correlation or connection to medicine, that's great, but it doesn't have to. The idea that you took it upon yourself to go some other part of the world, learn maybe a new language, culture, traditions, it's really a piece that says a lot about a person in terms of their growth, development, the ability to handle problems. I led a trip to Australia in the spring of 2018, and that was fantastic. But just to see students, you know, not come to me because they had a problem, that they had learned to figure things out on their own is great. And for any of the health professions, medicine, perhaps the best example, there is, as Gabby said, a list of activities that you're going to be putting into your primary application. But really what's critical for those is not what they were, but what did you get out of them? Tell me what you got out of that experience and how that helped you decide that medicine was the right choice for you. And so when people ask me, I often say that when you look at the process of applying to college, you know, this isn't meant to knock us or whatever, but a college application really takes a 3-dimensional person and more or less shoves them down to 2. It's primarily listing stuff. There's a little bit of writing. What all the health professions are good at is saying that their process of taking applicants to the people that they admit is they want to keep you as a 3-dimensional person. And they want to be looking at not just who you are academically, what kind of experiences you had, but what did you get out of them? And how does that tell me something about how you might handle patients in the future, interact with coworkers? And so study abroad is great. There's lots of other ways. Both Allery and Gabby have pointed out our connections to St. Cloud Hospital. But I always try to tell students, you're now in a world where people are going to be looking at you in 3 dimensions. So think about not just, so what did I do, but what did I get out? And perhaps you do something where you're in the minority by age or race or gender or ethnicity, but you're going to then say, hey, I learned to figure that out. I learned to get through that or to interact with those people when I was in the minority. And that's going to help because I'm going to see those people later on as patients or coworkers. So.
And I know a lot of students will, you know, typically, it's not always the case, but typically it's sort of it's a junior year if you're doing this semester long program, right?
Yeah, it can change to something like Gabby did, where if you make that decision to take a gap year, then doing study abroad as a senior can fit into somebody's plan and works much easier. The tricky thing, as both Allery and Gabby will tell you, is that the process of applying to medical school is about a 9-month process. And there's really nowhere to say in there, hey, give me a break for a little bit because I'm going to go
Mhm.
study abroad or do this fermentation class for 6 weeks or something like that. So um, what we try to do, and Manny and I have worked on this for a number of years, is to really say to students, you're coming into St. Ben's and St. John's. Our job is really, who are you when you end? And it's to make you the best applicant you can be that first time you're applying to medical school, dental school, PA school, whatever it is, whether it's somebody who's going to do it directly from undergrad or somebody who's going to take a gap year. You know, what makes the most sense to you?
Yeah, and I would add too, when you study abroad, typically you're taking a lot of your like general classes. Like they don't offer a ton of, your higher level science and those courses. So like when I was in London, I was taking, my ethics class, my second theology class. And so it does allow for a lot of flexibility. Like I know people who studied abroad sophomore year. I know people who studied abroad senior year like me. I do feel like a lot of people study abroad junior year. That was my original plan. I was going to study abroad in South Africa, actually. But because of COVID, they had to cancel that program, which is why I kind of pushed mine off, and it all turned out well. And then another thing I would add too is, in addition to like all of the different study abroad opportunities, I know that we do mission trips over spring break. Like, I don't know if it's the school or clubs that lead those, but I've had friends who've done mission trips to cities like all over the United States and they loved them. So that's another option.
Mhm. I hear really good things about that. Is it Vita volunteer program also?
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe Dave, you could talk just a little bit about that as an opportunity to get experience, sort of hands-on experience. And I know it's not run out of your pre-med advising, but you have a little background in it.
Right. So these are trips that are planned to coincide most often with our spring break, sometimes in the fall. And they're either going to be at some place in the US, like Gabby said, there'll be someplace in perhaps Central America. And people are going to then be going along with a medical crew, dental crew, and are probably going to be doing things like translating for patients what's happening, handing instruments to people so they can use them. And so it's a way to get eyes open, not only to what healthcare is like, but perhaps what life is like for individuals in other parts of the world. And so seeing those things, and again, being able to say, well, this is what I remember from that trip, and this is how I'll try to treat patients in the future, becomes an important element of answering that very simple but very hard question: why do you want to be a physician? Why do you want to be a dentist? Right. So but really, again, it's what you can tell me about your experiences that's going to interest me as a medical school admissions committee member.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I've heard said a number of times is that that when students are going and applying to their post college health programs, that a lot of the requirements for academics for classes are fairly prescribed. You need to take this biology class, you need to take this chemistry class, and I think Dave, maybe you even said it, that in that regard, pre-med is a pre-med, or pre-health sciences, no matter where you go. I always liked hearing more about some of those special opportunities that St. Ben's and St. John's offer. I know the Exploring Medicine class is always really popular, and we've started adding this global health minor, things like that. Can any of you talk to those opportunities?
Yeah. Oh, Allery, you want to go?
Well, I took one of the global health Well, okay, so it's a class, it's a creative writing class
Yeah.
called Clinical Encounters, and that was such a great class. I think they're starting to offer it for freshmen, and that's only a semester long.
Mm.
But I did one, it was a class that you had to apply. Of course, if you apply, you're generally going to get in. And it's a whole year-long process, and you volunteer through yet a different volunteering program at the St. Cloud Hospital. And then you have a ton of class discussion about just discrepancies in healthcare with minority groups. You can look at literature and how that can help you gain perspective, things of that nature. It was a really great class, and then I'm looking forward to taking, I think it's like Medical Empire, Global Health. Maybe somebody can tell me if that's correct. I think that's what it is. And healthcare, oh gosh, it's another global health one. It's a political science class, but they're all, they're all sort of scattered throughout subject matter. So I think I'm really excited to continue taking those classes.
Mm-hmm. And those are classes that aren't necessarily required by the medical schools or the physical therapy schools. They're maybe frosting on the cake, perhaps.
Yeah. So I like, Dave could probably speak more on this, but I think a lot of the pre-med requisites and pre-health requisites are more just your like hard science classes, bio classes, chem, like those things. But yeah, St. Ben St. John's offers a lot of other courses that kind of allow you to explore medicine and like all the different parts to it a bit more. And so I took a class called Exploring Medicine my sophomore year. It's taught by a St. Cloud physician, ER physician. His name is Dr. Jameson. And so he comes in, it was a once a week night class. And basically we just covered like different systems of the human body and got a really good understanding of kind of like what it is to be a physician. And so I know that I had friends who took that class with me, and some of us walked out of it like, wow, like I'm so excited to pursue medicine. And then I had a few friends who walked out and they're like, you know what, like I think this class just taught me that I want to do something else. And so that was a really great class to take. And then my junior year, I took a class called The Art of Healing. And that was also taught by a physician who works in the cities. He's an internal medicine doc, Dr. Warner. And that one was all about the like non-science part of medicine. So we actually read a lot of poetry and talked about like the special relationship between like patients and physicians. And I really, really enjoyed that class. And then I guess my senior year, I took a global health course, just like the intro class. And that was awesome. Like I kind of wish that I was coming in at your time so that I could, consider the global health minor. Because that class, we talked about, just how medicine is so different depending on where you are in the world, and how, in third world countries, like people are still dying every day of things that are super treatable here in a lot of the like Western world countries that are more developed, I guess. And then I also took a comparative healthcare policy class that was through the political science department. And so that one, I learned of what like Medicaid is and Medicare, and that's all stuff that they are most likely going to ask me in a medical school interview, like, do you know what Medicaid is? And you need to be able to give them some sort of an explanation. So yeah, I love that St. Ben St. John's offers, all of these little extra classes that can really help you in your application process and just help you become a better like health professional one day.
Comparative healthcare was the class that I was trying to think of earlier.
So they've been mentioned a few times, and when I get asked this question, what makes us stand out for somebody who's considering a career in the health sciences, it's not per se the biology or chemistry or physics courses. I mean, all of my colleagues are excellent teachers, but those things are there at all Minnesota private colleges, right? Nobody's going to not have a class to get you to do what you need to do academically. But what I would say, the things that are strong for us here at St. Ben's and St. John's, number one, we have a number of clubs, pre-med, pre-dent, pre-PA, and we've intentionally made the choice that the students run them. So Manny and I and a couple of the other advisors we kind of sit back and talk to the leaders and say, what do you want to do this year? What's going on? But it's really them to run it. But it's, I think, a really good experience, because then you come in and you get to meet some people that are juniors and seniors that are going to be doing the things that you think you want to do, and you have an avenue to talk to them. We're quite fortunate in that way that when they have these meetings, it's pretty easy to get alums that are in medical school or dental school or PA school or are working in our local community here to come in and talk to the students. And we just have a room and they go in there and they do whatever they want to do. I mean, we had a guy who went to a medical college of Wisconsin down in Milwaukee and made the choice for a year that he wasn't going to go to class. He was just going to read the books at the coffee shop every day. And he did fine. But he said, can I tell him that? I said, if somebody asks, feel free, so we really try to do those things, but giving students that chance to own them and do the things they want. The student hospital program that was mentioned is one of several programs that I think we're quite fortunate to have in terms of connections with St. Cloud Hospital. But again, that's a student-run group. There's about 30 students that are committed to that program. There's about 5 or 6 that are going to be designated as leaders, but they are the ones then who are making the schedule, fixing it when somebody can't be there, those types of things. So it is run through an office that we have on campus, but again, we're trying to let students do that. We also have those 2 classes that Gabby mentioned, Exploring Medicine and the Art of Healing, that do a number of things. The Exploring Medicine will tell you that the day of a family physician is very different than the day of a cardiologist, which is very different than the day of a radiologist. And so in some cases, it's not just why do you want to be a physician, but what part of being involved in the life of patients do you want? Do you want that job as an OB/GYN where every 3rd night you're on call all night long? Or do you want something else, right? And then that Art of Healing class is great because, again, as Gabby mentioned, it's not to talk about, well, this person has this condition, so you do X, Y, and Z. And I don't think they do any of that. But it's great because Todd talks about what he learns from the patients, from their families, how they try to work together, and how he handles it when it doesn't work. So those are important things that are going to happen. And then academically, that's been mentioned here, that we have 2 minors now that we've developed. One is this global health minor, and the second is this narrative practice. And they both kind of have been mentioned here in various things. The clinical encounters that Allery mentioned is part of this narrative practice minor, where if you look at medical education, there's a much bigger emphasis on that patient-physician dynamic and capturing that in ways that are beneficial for both parties. The global health is, again, one where we're trying to break down barriers between countries or nations or learn from each other. And both of those minors have a great deal of flexibility for students in terms of which courses will work in terms of completing that minor, but also fitting in with the major, or allow students to say, yes, I'm interested in global health in general, but more specifically, I'm interested in, I don't know, Latin America or something like that. And so there really is, I think, one overarching goal here for us in terms of healthcare. And like I said, it's really to be focused on the students, not, what are we benefiting from this, or how are we benefiting as advisors? It's really, how are the students doing?
I want to just remind our guests that if you do have questions, make sure you use the Q&A and ask away. We want to make sure we're getting your questions answered. Meanwhile, I continue to have all sorts of more questions, right? I think what I'll do is I go to the students a little bit, and depending upon where you're at with this, you may or may not have insights. But I continue to be kind of curious about the medical college admission test and preparing for that, and what that experience is like.
Yeah. So I think both Allery and I were studying for it this past semester. I ended up, so I started my studying in January, and then I took the MCAT in April. And I was studying during the school year, but I was taking a much lower credit load, which was nice. And honestly, like the classes that I took at St. Vincent St. John's really prepared me well for the test. But I did get like a set of review books from the Princeton Review. I know a lot of people use Kaplan too. And I think most people just will get like a book set and go through it. And it's kind of like a refresher from the classes that you've taken for the past 3 or 4 years. And then, yeah, you sit for the test. If you're taking the MCAT, it's like 7.5 hours. I think some of the other like pre-professional schools will have you take the GRE, which I don't really know much about, but yeah.
Yeah, I took Kaplan's course actually. What ended up happening is I also started studying in January. And I think, admitting now, I think I was a bit naive because I was planning to take it in March originally. And I just realized after taking practice tests that I just was not ready for this exam. And so when I realized that what I was doing wasn't enough, I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase a program. And that was like a live course set. So alongside those books Gabby was talking about, we got tutors, and it was, a bunch of random people from across the country who wanted to take this test. And then I pushed it back to April, and then I pushed it back again to May. And so I took it in May, and like Gabby said, it's a 7.5 hour test. So you really, your stamina is really being tested. And it's definitely something to learn how to compartmentalize. If you just had a bad section, to just take a deep breath and learn, you just gotta keep going.
Yeah, and I would add too that I didn't know much about the MCAT going into college, and so this was a test that I kind of got to learn about from both the students who were in the grades ahead of me. I know like my freshman and sophomore years, I kind of befriended some of the upperclassmen biochem majors, and a few of them who were also pre-med, like kind of explained to me what it was. And actually I got my book set from one of them, one of the students, he gave it to me. And then also the pre-med advisors are really great. I've met with both Dr. Mitchell here and Manny Campos multiple times throughout my 4 years, and they've kind of helped guide me through the process to both med school and then that MCAT. So there's a lot of people to help you.
I see we did have a question, and we'll see if we are following it properly. Question is about a student who might be interested in a surgical program, which I'm wondering if that, oh yes, and I see a follow-up. Yes, I'm interested in, oh wow, cardiothoracics people. This is above my art major level here.
Well, I would say yes, in general at this point, because at the point where Gabby and Allery are at right now, when you're applying to medical school, you can't really walk in and say, I'm going to be a cardiothoracic surgeon or bust, because there's only so many cardiothoracic surgeons in the world. And if they have a feeling that you're not going to be a person that still would be the type of physician we all want when we go see a physician, then that's not going to be in your favor. So I would say to you as an applicant right now, it's great that you have an idea of becoming a cardiothoracic surgeon. I have one former student that I can remember that is one now, and he's fantastic at it, I'm sure. But I think at this point, what you really want to try and emphasize is that idea that you get a grasp on why you want to be a physician. Medical school, your first 2 years are largely, again, a series of courses, and then the last 2 years are your clinical rotations. to get a cardiothoracic position, you're going to have to excel even amongst your medical school colleagues in both those first 2 years of medical school and in your clinical rotations. So I'd say keep that goal in mind, have an answer to why you want to be that, but also as you're an individual that's first applying to medical school, be cognizant of why you want to be a physician.
Mm-hmm. Thank you
Yeah.
for the question. Go ahead, Gabby.
I was going to say, this was already said too, but I think that with like any fields you're going into, but especially these pre-health fields, they just want to see that you are like actively involved in more than just your classes too. So whether that's music or sports or volunteer programs or like clubs that we have on campus, they just want to see that you're doing more than just your schoolwork. And if you can get like a leadership position or something too, that's great. So
I was gonna, to add on to Gabby's thing, one of my secondaries that I was working on today asked, what are my creative outlets and how have I pursued them? And also what are some leadership opportunities that I've had and how have I demonstrated leadership in those outside extracurriculars? So definitely backing up what Gabby said.
Mm-hmm. Dave, one of the questions I get asked as I go around to college fairs and students are walking by the table and thinking they're perhaps interested in pre-health is, what's your acceptance rate? And I know that question comes with a really long, interesting answer. So you might as well go ahead and answer it.
Okay. So the first thing I'll say is that there is no set rule or mechanism or formula by which undergraduate institutions are required to come up with that number. So there is certainly wiggle room in what schools will report. And to be frankly honest, I don't know what other schools do. And there's the idea simply shouldn't be, well, you went to Harvard as an undergrad, here's a scalpel, go to work on somebody, right away or something. But what I'll say is what we do at St. Ben's and St. John's is we count the first time an individual applies to either an allopathic or an osteopathic medical school. Now, allopathics are the MD schools, the traditional ones. The osteopathic medical schools, osteopathic medicine is a branch of medicine that's sort of evolved out of chiropractic medicine, nutrition, those types of things, where those are people that have degrees in osteopathic medicine. They have the letters DOM after their name, but they can go on and become cardiologists, radiologists, just like anybody else at an allopathic school. So we count that first time applicant. And if you look at the numbers for the last decade or so for St. Ben's and St. John's in total, the number of first-time applicants getting into allopathic or osteopathic schools will hover pretty close to 50%, perhaps just under that number. Bad year, it's getting closer to 45%, maybe 40. A good year, it's going to be 55 or something like that. The other thing I should say that we do is we never then change that number. So if unfortunately somebody doesn't get in that first year, but then reapplies and gets in their second time, we're not going to change that. So we count first-time applicants to MD or DO schools. And like I said, the number is pretty close to 50% plus or minus over the last decade.
I know that I've heard you speak also about pre-med committees at some colleges and how there's some pre-screening that goes on. Can you talk about that just a little bit too?
Right. So there are some institutions, even some here in Minnesota, that will have an official pre-med committee that gets involved in what's called the secondary phase of the process. Allery mentioned it a few minutes ago. And so the process of applying starts with what's called a primary application, very similar to a college application, except now in addition to your classes, you're putting in those list of activities, you're putting in those MCAT scores, And then you get this thing that Gabby and Allery really loved, which is this one-page essay that says, basically, why do you want to be a physician? It's called a personal statement, which really is, why do I want to be a physician? That, when it's all packaged together, is sent to as many schools as you indicate, but it's sent the same to everybody. Schools will take a look at that. They'll have their committee do something. They may just look at your grades and MCAT scores and say you're good enough. And then they put you in what's called the secondary phase. And in the secondary phase, what they're then going to do is they're going to send to applicants a series of questions that they're now going to answer directly about that medical school, them as an applicant. So it's really a question of fit, but fit in both directions. And then they're also going to go back and ask for letters of recommendation from people. Now, some schools say that that committee is responsible for writing that letter, and they just leave it to the committee to do it. And that committee might go and solicit information from other people, or they might just decide, well, we know this person from this class and we'll write this letter. We have sort of taken the opposite approach, and this is why I mentioned in my first answer there that you should try to get to know somebody every year, because what we do is we exist as individual letter writers. We think as a group of pre-health advisors, we don't necessarily know more than somebody who's gotten to know Allery or Gabby over a year or 2 or 3 years. In fact, we probably don't know more. And so for people from St. Ben's and St. John's, what's going to happen is on their primary application, they're just going to check a box and they're going to say, these letters are coming from these people. And when we get to the secondary phase, then that school is going to reach out to the application service and say, we want these letters. And so at that point, then what the committee has in front of them is the primary application, the letters that have come in, and then the candidates' responses to their secondary application questions. They're going to take all of that, and they're going to then make a judgment or a decision that says, yes, we want to interview this person, or no, we don't, or maybe we want to interview this person, but we're going to hold off on that a little bit later. That then means the last step of this is an interview. It's at the medical school. It's about a day or a day and a half. You're going to get asked all kinds of questions. You're going to get some financial aid information, tours, all of that stuff. But the general idea is, if you're at a medical school interview, they like what they see on paper, but now they've really got to figure out who you are under the skin. Are you somebody that will be their colleague as a physician later on? So that was very quick and dirty
Yeah.
in the process.
Well, that was helpful. Thank you. See, we're kind of approaching 8:15 or so, and we've covered a lot of ground. As we kind of wind down, I'm wondering if the students, if you have some insights, thoughts, recommendations on both the college search process, and then something else that perhaps we didn't cover about your college experience.
Yeah, so just making sure the students on this session, they're not like St. Ben's, St. John's.
Correct. These are prospective students. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I guess I can talk about my college search. So yeah, I was born and raised in Duluth, Minnesota, and I knew that I wanted to stay like somewhat in the Midwest region. Like I wanted to be within driving distance. And so I started out my college search by just visiting a number of places with my mom, both in like Minnesota and Wisconsin. And I realized pretty fast after touring like the University of Minnesota and stuff that I wanted a smaller school, at least for my undergraduate career, just because I liked the smaller class sizes. I like getting to know your professors a bit better and like being able to actually go up to them and ask them questions if you ever, want clarification on something. And so that narrowed my college search a bit. And I started looking at like St. Ben's, St. Thomas, Gustavus. My dad wanted me to be looking at some public institutions as well, just because on paper, the private places, like they look like they're a lot more expensive. But after I got all of my like financial aid stuff back, it was actually cheaper for me to go to like St. Ben's and some of these places than like the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, which is a smaller school but public. And so then once I kind of got it narrowed to like my, like, I would say like 3 different schools, I kind of did like a second tour at each place. And it was through that I really just, I loved St. Ben's. I liked the people I met there. I felt like it was a really just welcoming environment. And I made my college decision kind of last minute. Like, I think I decided to go to St. Ben's 2 weeks before the like college decision day. And even then it was like, I really liked St. Ben's, but you know, there's always this little part of you that's like, oh, like, is this the place for me? But now that I'm graduated, I can honestly say like, I'm so glad I went to St. Ben's. I can't imagine having gone anywhere else. Yeah.
Well, my story is a little, I guess I have family connections to this school, so I guess I knew I was going to come here, but I could not, looking back, be luckier to have gone to this school. Gabby emphasized small class sizes. I think that's so important, especially when we hit COVID. It was super important that I connected with my professors. And also, I think it works out really well for those letters of recommendations. I feel like I know my profs so well. I've cried in front of a couple actually, so like I don't know if that says something about me, but it goes to show that I really do feel close to these professors. So very lucky to have been a family connection to this school. And as for advice, I think, you know, we've been talking about extracurriculars and all this stuff. Just be true to yourself. I was so worried coming into pre-medicine that I would be very vanilla, and I think at the end of the day, if you just do what you love and you really talk about that, then you'll be okay.
Super, thank you. And you know, to the attendees, a couple things. One is you know, hopefully this was helpful for you and you're learning a lot about pre-health and pre-health at St. Ben's and St. John's. It's important for us to make sure that you make a college decision that you're happy with, and that you, as you look back on your college experience, you decided that, you know, you made a really good choice. So we're here to continually help you along the way. If you have follow-up questions, reach out to admission. We can always get you easily in contact with Dave or Manny or any other professor. We can get you in contact with current students. We have a lot of opportunities to visit campus, both day visits, overnight visits during the school year. We actually have a health sciences program in the fall, which is a day-long program that showcases the health sciences. However, if you come and do an individual visit, we can always get you connected with anybody and everybody you want on campus. You're going to have questions about scholarships. You're going to have questions about applying for admission, all sorts of questions. We're here to help you. Make sure at the colleges you're looking at, try to get to know somebody in the admission office that is the person that will help shepherd you through the process. If you don't know who your admission representative is at St. Ben's and St. John's, reach out to us and we'll get that name to you. We will follow up tomorrow, early next week, with an email that includes the video of this webinar, and we will include related links that will help you get to spots around the web that will give you more information about some of the topics that were discussed tonight. Other than that, panelists, do you have anything else to add? Nope.
I don't think so.
Okay, super. I think we got a long ways tonight, and it's still light outside, so I might just go back and sit around my fire pit. Thank you very much to the panelists. Always very impressed with the great things that you bring to these discussions, and thank you to the attendees for coming along with us tonight. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.